How many of you have ever seen the movie Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger? The classic line, "I'll be back." If you studied your history books, you knew that General MacArthur was leaving the Philippines. He said, "I shall return." The first person to make that promise, though, was about 2,000 years ago in John chapter 14. Jesus is letting his disciples know that he's going to be crucified. He's going to the cross, but he says, "If I go away, I'll be back." Kind of. It's kind of the Greek thing twisted a little bit different than that. But he made the promise, if I go away, I will come again and receive you into myself. Knowing that God had a plan from the beginning of time, and his end game, the end part, was for you and I to be with him in eternity forever, culminating with what we have been looking at for the past 2 Sundays and the past couple of Wednesday nights, the second coming of Christ. And we have been looking at on Sunday mornings the 7 signs that point to the second coming of Jesus. We covered some of them last week. We're going to finish it up today so that I can do a special Mother's Day message next Sunday. And remember, bring your children, your grandchildren, and your neighbor's children, because we want 50 in children's church so that Jonathan will have to shave his head, okay? Last week we looked at the return of the Jews to the Holy Land, the coming of a Western European empire, the rise of a dictator. We're going to finish off the rest of those 4 days. Is it okay if I go about 5 or 6 minutes longer than what I normally do? Can you handle that today? A one world religion. Can I just be the first person to tell you that I am fed up with Washington, D.C.? I am a rational thinking, level-headed, responsible human being. But I can see how the way things are in our society today, just here in America, how many rational, good people in a similar frame of mind would agree to just about anything that sounded good from somebody who looked good with a program that promised to do good, rather than all the chaos that we have right now. And the end times prophecy in the Bible tells us the Antichrist will come, present that program, and in the midst of that, he will also set up a one-world religion that at first will look very pleasing to the world and very acceptable, but it will turn and become a very horrid thing. There is a great deception that is coming upon the earth in these end times, and it's going to look good. It's going to have a false love to it. It's going to have a false light to it and a false unity to it. And I will be the first to tell you, I want peace. I don't want to see another church shooting. I don't want to see another synagogue shooting. I don't want to see another mosque shooting. I want to get along with everybody. I want to be friends with my Arab neighbors. I want to be friends with my Hindu neighbors. I want to live in a society where we get along. However, I cannot sacrifice this book at the altar of coexistence in how society would tell us to do that today. Well, then you're a hater. No, I'm not. In fact, I am motivated by the greatest love this world has ever seen or ever will see. A love that calls someone to leave the perfect setting in heaven, come to this world, take on the flesh of man, and be nailed to a cross so that my sins could be paid for. That is what motivates me. That is the love that motivates me. And it all because of the power of that love that I stand with that book to say that there is only one way to heaven. Jesus Christ paid that penalty. Now, to show you where we are at on this end time end line, in February of this year, just literally a few weeks ago, the Pope and the Grand Imam of Al-Zahar, he is the leader of the Shiite clerics in the world. They signed a historic declaration of fraternity calling for peace between nations, religions, and races in front of a global audience that had religious leaders from all the different faiths in the world. Now, at its face value, you'd think, I'm all for that. But let me read to you one portion of the document that they signed. Freedom is a right of every person. I agree with that. I'm on board with that. Each individual enjoys the freedom of belief, thought, expression, and action. I'm on board with that. But look at the next sentence. The pluralism and the diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in his wisdom. What they're telling you is that if these different religions were willed by God, then they are all equal and accepted by God on the exact same plane. So there's many different ways you can get to heaven and get to God based on what this document is telling you. I, again, am motivated not by hate, but by love and the belief that, yeah, there's 1,000 different ways you can get to God, but they're all going to detour through one Jesus Christ and his sacrifice on Calvary. So you have the seeds already in place for something that's going to look good on the outside, feel good, and it's going to be very appealing to it. But in the essence, what it is saying is that these are all equal and acceptable in God's sight. And I'm sorry, I hate to be the one to tell you that, but that's just not the case. This one world religion will be very appealing. And I understand it sounds, if somebody doesn't have a strong background in Scripture or things that I'm talking about, it sounds like I'm the one who's advocating a cult today and hating everybody else. But when Jesus was asked by his disciples, tell us what the signs are of the end time. What is it going to be like at the end time? He said this in Matthew chapter 24. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name claiming I am the Christ and will deceive many. The first issue that Jesus dealt with regarding end time events and signs were religious deception. It's going to look very good. It's going to sound very good. But this one world religion of just compiling everybody and everybody just joining together is one of the signs of the second return of Christ. Now, the next sign that we're looking at on the second coming is one to this day I still cannot conceive in my mind how it's going to happen, and that is the rebuilding of the temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There is a specific spot where there will be the third temple in the history of in Israel to build a temple. And I believe as end time events unfold, that there will be secular Jews and atheistic Jews, as they see things beginning to shape up, they will be motivated to come together for one goal and one vision, and that will be reunifying to build another temple there in Jerusalem. The first temple was built by Solomon. It was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 587 BC. It was rebuilt in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah about 538 BC, and that temple lasted all the way till 70 AD when the Roman army destroyed it. Now, I know you're sitting there going, he is going way too fast and things are having too quick. Can you just stay with me for a few more minutes? If you need to go get another cup of coffee, we'll let you slip out, get a couple of swigs, and come back in. But hang with me for a little bit this morning. There are two very important chapters in the Old Testament book of Ezekiel, 38 and 39. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, the prophet tells us by the word of God about a battle called the Battle of Gog and Magog, which is key in the end time events. We're going to talk more about this in the next point, but it's actually armies that align to attack Israel. This is so vitally important in end time prophecy, these two chapters. But in chapter 40, Ezekiel takes the next 9 chapters to talk about the future house of the Lord, the temple. 2 chapters about the battle, 9 chapters about the temple. That's how important the rebuilding of the temple is, not just in Jewish mindset, but in the prophetic time as well. Now, we know where this temple is going to be built. It's in a location in Jerusalem called the Temple Mount. So where it's going to be built is not a problem. The problem is there's already a building on that exact same spot. And that is the Temple Mount, and that building there with the golden roof is where the temple is supposed to be. This is just a small little detail in that building is called the Dome of the Rock, and it is the third holiest site in the Islam religion. So somewhere God is going to have to work this out to where the Arabs who don't even want to acknowledge the existence of Israel and the Jews are going to have to give up their third holiest site so that they can build this new temple on this very spot and remove the Dome of the Rock. It is the holiest site in Judaism because it is believed it is at that spot that the first temple was, and that's where the Holy of Holies was. It's also believed that that is the spot where Abraham was tested by God regarding the sacrifice of his son Isaac. So world security experts say that is the most dangerous square mile on the face of the planet. And somehow God is going to work it out where a temple is going to be rebuilt there. Going all the way back to the 1960s, there are groups in Israel that are already planning for the rebuilding of that temple. 1967, the Temple Mount Faithful was started. 1987, the Temple Institute. They're already gathering the plans together to do that. Now, the one possible scenario to explain how that Dome of the Rock Islamic mosque becomes the third temple may be the war that is mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. which brings us to another one of the signs of the second coming, that being Israel will be invaded by an army from the north. Stay with me. I'm actually going somewhere this morning. You're going to stay with me. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 38. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against them, saying, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you with your whole army. Are you understanding? God is in control of all of this. This is no telling how big of an army from what country. God says, I'm just going to put a hook in your mouth, and I'm going to be the one who draws you at the right place at the right time to do this. Your horses, your horsemen, fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. So Israel is going to be attacked by this army from the north, and Magog and Gog is involved in this. Now, these are two stupid names, Gog and Magog. Where do you come up with these names? Why are they in the Bible? Why can't they just do a John, a Phil, and a Susie for everything we write on it? Genesis chapter 10. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog. Magog was a grandson of Noah. And as you follow Genesis chapter 10, you will see the genealogy, and not just the genealogy, but it will tell you where some of these tribes went and settled. So from biblical evidence and extra biblical evidence, you can trace the descendants of Magog, and later on in history, they are called Scythians, and the Scythians settled in what is now modern-day Russia. If you are familiar with the world setting today, Russia and Iran have an alliance together in which they are gearing up toward their animosity toward Israel. So the prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, the key players are already in place. The stage is set. The only thing we're waiting for is the curtain to open up in the direction we give them to start the play. It fits. But in these end-time events, this battle of Gog and Magog, there is one more battle, one more military campaign that we find in Revelation chapter 16. Then they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Just mentioning that word, just saying that term gives you a mental image, a picture. Hollywood has always depicted Armageddon as the end of the world. It is that kind of a clash that is going to happen. It's a climax. Armageddon is really the climax of a heavenly battle that began in the heavens, was transferred to this earth, and now is coming full circle as Satan tries to defeat God. And at the Battle of Armageddon, that will be Satan's attempt to destroy God by destroying Israel. Because if he can destroy Israel, he can wipe away the covenant that God has with them. So Satan can't get directly to God, so he tries to destroy God by going after God's people. Now, all of this connects. All the prophecies in Ezekiel connects with Daniel and ties together with the things in Revelation. And when you look at Armageddon in Revelation chapter 16, 17, and 18, it talks about the great harlot. The great harlot is always symbolic of a false religion. What is that false religion? That one world religion that started with the Antichrist is there. So all of these things meld together. And they culminate with one of the most epic events that the most epic event the universe has ever seen. Anything you have seen in any movie with the special effects that just made you go, wow, the second coming of Christ is just going to blow that out of the water. Zechariah talks about it in chapter 14. Behold, a day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights on a day of battle. And that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. For it will be a unique day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but it will come about that at evening time there will be light. And in that day living waters will flow out of Jerusalem. And the Lord will be king over all the earth. In that day the Lord will be the only one, and his name the only one. There's coming a point in time where the culmination, part of the end game, is that Israel will be surrounded, about to be wiped off the face of the earth. There's no way in the world they can survive. And then the second coming of Christ happens. He comes down, saves Israel, begins the redemption process and the restoration of the nation of Israel, and then he begins to establish a millennial kingdom. And those are the basic 7 signs that point to the return of Christ, the second coming of Christ. But there is one more prophecy that we've got to look at. Acts chapter 2, verse 17. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Do you know what I like about that prophetic statement? It is about the only one in the whole Bible I can understand. This is clear. This is to the point. It's easy to grasp and understand. In the last days, God says, I'm going to pour out my Spirit on all people. That is an indication that the time is near. Several years ago, there was a wealthy Egyptian businessman who had a very expensive watch, and he lost the watch. The watch was valued at over $10,000. And he retraced his steps to try to find the watch, and he eventually went all the way out to the garbage dumps in Cairo. And he's going through the garbage dumps trying to find a $10,000 watch. And he finds one of the workers at the garbage dump there. And he asks him, I'm looking for this. He goes, wait a second, I've got that watch. And he runs back and pulls the watch out and says, here it is. And the businessman went, wait a second. This watch is worth your salary 4 years. Why didn't you sell it? Why didn't you pawn it? Why don't you? He says, the Jesus I follow would not want me to have your watch. And the English businessman sat there for a second and said, if that's the kind of Jesus you follow, I think I want to know more about this Jesus. So the guy who works at the garbage dump begins to establish a relationship with this English businessman. And he says, you need to come help us. You need to come down to the garbage dump. He says, there's no way in the world I'm getting my wife to come down here and have the garbage dump. So over time, God begins to minister. This English businessman begins to study the Bible. He eventually becomes an ordained priest, goes down to the garbage dump, finds a cave in Egypt, and starts a church at the garbage dump. Now, over time, this is what the cave now looks like. Over the course of 1 week, next to a garbage dump in a cave in a Middle Eastern country, 70,000 people will gather to worship at that cave next to a garbage dump every week. Would anybody like to see what the fulfillment of Acts 2:17 looks like in that cave? Take 60 seconds and watch this video. They're next to a garbage dump in a cave in the Middle East. 70,000 people a week go into that cave. And in Southeast Texas, there's people, well, it rains Saturday. I guess we're not going to be able to make it to church on Sunday. You pull into the park, somebody's in my parking. It ain't your parking place. Get out and come in with a good attitude. Some visitors in my chair. It ain't your chair. Come in and worship anyway. Well, somebody got all the donut holes. Get here a little bit earlier then, and you can get some donut holes. In the last days, saith God, I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. In Thailand, there's a move of God. In China, there's a move of God. In Africa, a move of God. In Latin America, a move of God. Who wants one in Southeast Texas that we can testify He's coming back soon? I don't have a $10,000 watch, but I can look at it and I can tell you what time it is. You open up the back, I would be dumbfounded. All the different parts of that watch, I can't imagine how you make a watch work. All the different gears and parts, it's too complex for me. I can't figure it all out. I've got to take it to somebody just to change the battery in it. It's too complex, too complicated for me. It's got an arm for the hour, one for the minute, one for the second. Then it's got another gear to move the day. It's got another gear to move the number. I don't know how it works. All I know is I can look at it, and as complicated as it is, I can tell what time it is. So I'm sitting in my office going, God, how do I explain the end time events? It's too complicated. One prophecy connects with another, and the one in Ezekiel, you got to understand Revelation to interpret Daniel. You got to know what's going on. I can't. You open this up. I don't understand how to do it. God, what do I do? How do I get this across? He says, son, just tell them what time it is. It's about time for all the wrongs to be made right. It's about time for all the injustice to be corrected. It's about time that we will never hear the word cancer again. It's about time we will never hear the word disease again. It's about time we'll never hear diabetes again. It's about time we'll never hear heart failure again. It's about time you will not have to say goodbye to a loved one again. It's about time, ladies and gentlemen, that we'll say goodbye to death and disease. It's about time that the last tear will fall. It's about time we will not say goodbye to another loved one. It is about time for conflict to cease. It is about time for there to be no more war to be studied. He's coming soon, ladies and gentlemen. How many need to get ready today?